It's that time. Yes, it's that time of the day. It's Talking Pints. And tonight I am joined by Baroness Hoey of Lisle Hill and Rathlin in the county of Antrim.
Yes.
I'll call you Kate. Kate, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you
to
very
Talking
much.
Pints. That title, it's incredibly grand for somebody that started out as a Marxist, isn't it?
Yes, but it is my old school, my old primary school, my old first church where my parents were married, Lisle Hill, and where I spent my childhood and loved rural country area. And then Rathlin is the only inhabited island off the coast of County Antrim, and I've got a cottage there, and I've been going since I was about 5. So I was a bit greedy and had the 2 titles together.
Well, it certainly reads
very posh,
incredibly
yeah,
impressively.
very posh.
Okay, we'll come to the House of Lords in a moment, and I, my rather deep scepticism about the makeup of its membership.
I keep hoping you're going to come in and join
I
us.
don't think that's going to happen to me in a hurry, but we will come to the Lords. But the interesting thing is, you were elected back in 1989, 30 years.
Yeah.
30 years in the House of Commons. How did you bear it?
Well, it got increasingly worse, particularly those last few years in terms of what was going on over Brexit. And I think that's when I knew that I could have stayed on probably, but 30 years was a nice time to go. And frankly, it had changed so much. When I came in first, there was no television. We'd waited for ages to get a room. Everything was done by letter. You had time to look at your correspondence and answer it. Everything changed so much. And then the kind of people in the House of Commons changed. I remember sitting around the tea room with all the old miners, ex-miners who were MPs and people who'd worked in factories, and really feeling I was the 41st woman out of 650 odd. So you did feel... And I never felt discriminated against at all, because some of those older men were really what I call just decent working class guys who just accepted you as you were. And I enjoyed all that. And then it changed, and we got lots and lots of young
Because you had... So Thatcher was Prime Minister when you first were there.
Yes, I was.
Then it was the major years, and then it was New Labour.
Oh, Tony Blair.
And not many ex-miners anymore. Very different kind of people selected. But I suppose from the Labour perspective, Blair, Mandelson, Campbell, they did turn it into a winning machine, didn't they?
Oh, there's no doubt about it in terms of success for the Labour Party getting into government. To win 3 elections as he did was a success. And, the irony is probably the Iraq War was what changed the whole attitude to him. But there's no doubt about it. And the thing that I felt most pleased about what Tony Blair did, and it's probably a minor thing now, was he changed the position on Northern Ireland. Before that, the Labour Party had a position that said, we will campaign for a united Ireland. He changed that position to say it's not up to us, it's up to the people of Northern Ireland. And that fundamentally changed. And of course, that led on to discussions and debates over what was happening there.
And in the early days, there was some preferment for you, wasn't there?
Oh, well, I was in the Home Office as a Home Office Minister with Jack Straw's Home Secretary. And then what was supposedly my dream job, I loved it. I was Sports Minister.
I know. A Sports Minister that likes sport.
Well, exactly. That was the difference. And that's why I didn't last very long, because although I liked football, I wasn't prepared to go along with the whole obsession that Tony Blair and Alistair Campbell had about football was how they would get working class votes. And football got so much of the publicity, and the grassroots sports were just kind of ignored. And we could have done so much more. We did start to change things. I got education, schools, what was happening in school sport, and what was happening in my department to at least talk together, because that was ridiculous. I was the sports minister, but I had no say whatsoever in what was going on in
And of course you had a test match ground in your constituency, the
Yes,
Oval, right at the heart of...
Honorary Vice President, lovely. And we got a lot of outreach work there too, because it was important. We were just a couple of miles away from Brixton. A lot of young Afro-Caribbean young people needed to be able to get to play cricket. And Surrey did reach out very, very well on that. And
John Major, of course, a member of Surrey.
And I remember when he lost his, when he lost the election, he came straight down to the Oval to watch, and he still is a cricket fan.
Do you get on with John Major?
Well, I did, very much. I think, like on a lot of issues, the EU and Brexit,
And your poles apart.
We're poles apart.
Yes.
On a lot of other things, he was very, very good. And, of course, he was absolutely responsible for getting the National Lottery going.
Yeah.
Without him, sport would not have got all the extra money for the, the high-level sport. So but I don't think we agreed on Europe at all.
No, absolutely not. Or with any former Prime Minister, come to that.
No.
But, Kate, no, I remember you in that role, and I remember thinking, wow, this is exciting. Somebody doing the sports job that loves sport and wants more young kids to play sport.
I was a PE teacher before I took the economics degree. So, I did care and understand.
Yeah.
And I felt very strongly that, up at the top level of government, they weren't really interested in what was happening at the grassroots. Although if you don't get that right, you're not going to get the achievement at the higher level.
And after that period of time, were you destined to be a backbencher?
Well, I'd always been quite independent, even when I was a minister, and you just tried to hide away when there was something happening that you didn't want to support. But, you were so busy with your job, you didn't feel too strongly about some issues. And then once I was on the backbenches again, you see, I had rebelled back in 1992 on the Maastricht Treaty when John Smith wanted us to abstain, and I voted against.
But you've probably been Eurosceptic longer than I have, I think.
Well, no.
But then the Labour Party wasn't it?
Well, the Labour Party was, and we had, my early days, and people like Austin Mitchell, who's just sadly died,
I saw
and
that.
people I remember Brian Gould, people like that were there, and there was and it just all changed with this sort of Blair idea that we had to be good new Europeans, which was, I think, the beginning of the retreat from understanding what working class people thought.
Well, you campaigned hard in the referendum.
We had a few little rallies, didn't we?
Well, we did, and we worked our hardest.
Very hard.
And as it turned out, there were two campaigns. I would rather at the beginning they'd come together, but I think ultimately it didn't really matter. Maybe it was a benefit. We did what we did, but just talk me through that 3.5 year period in the House of Commons. I mean, I was obviously in the European Parliament watching it, and I've got the feeling that sort of when people look back at this in 100 years' time, it's one of the most shameful periods of our history. What was it? How nasty was it in there?
There was a very undercurrent of unhappiness and nastiness around. And for those of us on the Labour side, there were very few of us. There were more who were quietly perhaps thinking what we were thinking, but for all sorts of reasons didn't say so. So there was a small group of us. We had to put up with, being treated as if we were some kind of pariahs because we kept supporting, first of all, the need for a referendum, and then when the referendum result came, actually saying, look, we promised we were going to implement this. Yeah. And I'm afraid from the day one, really, it was obvious that certain elements within the Labour Party, and not just the Labour Party, were determined to try and stop Brexit. And it was nasty. And
yet, Kate, there were 4.5 million, maybe 5 million Labour voters that voted Brexit.
Yeah, and some of their MPs were, standing up, almost having a go at their own constituents for daring to think that leaving the EU might be the right thing to do.
Millions of them.
So, we warned then. I mean, I remember speaking at rallies and saying things like, we are betraying our Labour voters and Labour will suffer. And, of course, I predicted that we would win. On the Monday, on the Daily Politics, I predicted that Leave was going to win and was looked at as if I was absolutely mad. But if you'd been out on those rallies, when you were there, and we saw those people who came out and were so...
The passion was
actually, I found it quite moving. I find it, because people would come up to me and say, oh, I'm really pleased there's a Labour MP here, And those few of us, I think we did our bit to really show that there was a strength within it. It's changed, and I don't think Labour will ever really get back to that feeling that they're representing working class people.
I said for years that I was going to cause an earthquake in British politics, that the UKIP insurgency would cause an earthquake in British politics. And I'm kind of of the view that the Labour Party still hasn't recovered from Brexit, still hasn't worked out what it is. I mean, how do you assess Keir Starmer's leadership?
Well, I'm not very impressed. I mean, I don't think he's going to rock the world, as they say, or change the. His whole attitude is very much almost a kind of steady as you go kind of thing, and also he's he doesn't have the charisma.
No, I agree.
And you do need charisma if you're going to. What he doesn't have, I reviewed one of the books by the Ashcroft book, and I said, it comes across as if he doesn't really have the ability to persuade people to go with him if they're if they don't agree with him. And I don't think Labour will be in power with Keir as leader. It's going to take some time. And you're right, they haven't accepted Brexit.
No, they still haven't.
It's the same within, in the House of Lords as well. There's a kind of almost bitterness there now, which is almost worse than during the campaign of just... we lost and we don't like it.
The war is over. We've got to get on with it.
Now we've got to get on and make it work. And, of course, I would be quite critical sometimes of the government for not capitalising enough. But maybe, the COVID has obviously been a
Well, COVID's been a problem. But also, I was just a bit mystified today that I thought, well, the one person everyone said was doing a great job was Liz Truss. And, her job was there to negotiate the trade deals and to move us on way beyond the deals that the EU did with us. And she's been promoted today to Foreign Secretary, which is good for her, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose there's some kind of linkage there. Anne-Marie Trevelyan was a strong Brexit, so that's a good result. But, the Prime Minister is quite... I don't think he's very good at being nasty, to people. And he did seem to surround himself after he first became Prime Minister with a lot of people who had actually campaigned strongly to remain. Now, I'm not sure. I think most people within the cabinet have accepted that we're leaving, so left.
And even if you look at today's cabinet reshuffle, it's much more Brexity than it was before. Yeah. Look, the country's accepted it. There is no going back. The problem is Northern Ireland, of course, a subject dear to your heart. Yeah. And I know you've written and spoken extensively about the Northern Ireland Protocol. What do we do?
Well, I keep feeling that Lord Frost, I genuinely think Lord Frost wants to sort it. I think Lord Frost understands it wasn't really his idea in the first place. I blame Theresa May very, very much for the whole backstop.
Because Boris, whatever we think of Boris, he was given a very bad hand of cards, wasn't he?
He had. We were going to probably have a good chance of losing it in Parliament after all those 3.5 years. And I think he genuinely didn't think the EU would be as nasty as they turned out to be, although that was a bit silly of him. Yeah. And secondly, I think he really did think that we could get out of it quite quickly. I still think we've got to get out of it. There's no point tinkering. It's not about trade to me. It's all about constitutional.
Of course.
And that's, but more MPs, Tory MPs too, are understanding that it's got to go. And, as I said, and Jeffrey Donaldson said, and Jim Allister said, and lots of people have said, the Prime Minister has to choose. He has to choose now between stability in Northern Ireland, keeping to the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which was very much about balance.
Yeah.
Or the protocol. He can't really have both long term, and he doesn't have a lot of time.
No, it is deeply concerning. And whether we're going to see an increase in loyalist militant behaviour.
Well, I think they feel they've not been listened to, that they've been ignored, and that the only way you get anything sometimes has been what some of the Republicans have done, is threaten violence.
And that's the worry, isn't it, really?
It is. It's very worrying.
On a happier subject, so you decided after 30 years you'd done your bit, and you really had done your bit, and well done you, because it's not the easiest job. People out there think, it's an absolute cinch being an MP or an MEP. It's not, is it? There is actually some hard work.
Huge amount of work, particularly if you have an area that's very, parts of it very deprived, lots of people with problems. And, the MP sometimes is the last resort.
Do you become like a social worker almost? Well,
I think there is quite a lot of that. And maybe, some people would have said maybe I was too constituency focused, and that if I'd sort of, forgotten a bit more about that and done other things and not been quite so rebellious, I could have been, gone much further up the career ladder. But I've enjoyed it. I miss my constituency involvement, but I don't miss the sort of constant push of.
And as you say now, unlike when you joined with email and social media, and it just never stops.
Yeah, well, I just wonder what kind of person I will want to become an MP, it is going to be probably more the younger element who just goes straight from university, and that's not good.
No, I agree with you. I think people have had proper jobs and been in the real world. It's far better to have a mixture of people, as you said you saw when you first went there.
Yeah.
But now, of course, you are Baroness Hoey of Lyle Hill and Rathlin in the county of Antrim, and you're in the House of Lords. I mean, this is very grand, Kate. Seriously, I look at the House of Lords, and there's a couple of hundred of Tony Blair's mates, and a couple of hundred of David Cameron's mates, and goodness knows now how many.
Lots of Lib Dems.
104 Lib Dems.
I know.
How do you get on there? What do you think about the place?
Well, I was lucky because we came in, a group of us, about a year ago when restrictions were very high. So we kind of kept going in when we were allowed to, and there were very few of us there. So we got to know the place very well. Mm-hmm. Very different, obviously, from the Commons. But people are very nice, most of them. But there is a kind of hard core of people who would look at someone like me and someone like Claire Fox and some of the others who came in as being, not quite really...
Not proper sorts.
Well, because, yes, we still, we have that awful thing, Brexit, hanging around. But no, its job, its job is to scrutinise and so on, but what we can't have is the House of Lords actually stopping something that the government has had in its manifesto. It can't. No, I think it's far too big.
It can't go on the way.
I know it sounds ridiculous. I've gone in and I'm saying it's far too big, but there were an awful lot of people put in after the Liberal Democrat Conservative government. But we'll do our bit, and I'll still speak out and
please promise
independent.
Me. Please promise me that you'll be a rebel in the House of
Lords.
Oh,
I have already been a rebel. Well, I have nobody to rebel about because I'm what's called I'm not a crossbencher either, because they're very much full of academics and diplomats. I'm non-aligned, non-affiliated. That's it, non-affiliated. So you can make your own views.
Well, thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you very much. And thanks to you for everything you did on Brexit.
Well, I believed in it with all my heart and soul, and I still do. That was the non-aligned Kate Hoey.